Hello and welcome. Today we are going to learn about human reproduction of class 12 biology. And the topic for today is gametogenesis. In simpler terms, birth of gametes. Here, gamete means the sex cells known as sperm and ova, and genesis means formation or birth. By definition, it means that it is a process by which male and female gametes are formed, or the sex cells, and they are known as sperm in males and ova or egg cells in females. These gametes are formed in seminiferous tubules of male testes, known as the sperm. For female, they are formed in ovaries from the follicle cells, known as the egg cells or ova or oogenia. So, this gametogenesis process takes place in the gonads of male and female humans. And these gonads are the sexual organs that a male and a female has. We know that gametes are haploid cells and they differ from somatic cells. Somatic cells are the non-sexual cells which are present all throughout the body, whereas the gametes are the haploid cells. Haploid cells contain half the number of chromosomes, whereas somatic cells contain full number of chromosomes, which are 46. We know by cell division that when it takes place from mitosis we get somatic cells, and by meiosis we get haploid cells. And in order to understand this, let's go back to the process of fertilization. What is fertilization? It is the fusion of male and female gamete, and they fuse to form a zygote. So, when male and female gametes are fusing in fertilization, so they cannot carry the full number of chromosomes. Why? Because they need to maintain the chromosomal number after fertilization. And this is why the haploid cells will always contain half the number of chromosomes, which means 23 pairs, which means 22 pairs of chromosomes, either X or Y. And this process, the process of gametogenesis, in males is known as spermatogenesis, and in females it is known as Oogenesis. Gametogenesis and oogenesis takes place in the male and female gonads, and when this process is taking place, it is divided into 3 phases of development or growth. And these phases are: number 1, multiplication phase; secondly, a growth phase; and third, the maturation phase. And to understand this process fully, we need to look at the diagram, which will tell us that how this process is taking place. So we know that gametogenesis takes place from haploid cells, and it is the generation of male and female gamete. These cells go through 3 phases: the multiplication phase, growth phase, and maturation phase. The haploid cells take part in that. So the basic difference between a somatic and sex cells is that the haploid cells will go into gametogenesis, whereas the diploid cells, which are known as the somatic cells, have 46 to n number of chromosomes. twice the number of chromosomes in haploid cells, because here one pair is missing. We know that the haploid cells are produced by meiosis, whereas other cells which are somatic are produced by somatic cells, and they are present in our body except the gonads, where the sex cells or the haploid cells are present. So gametogenesis, the production of haploid cells, or sperms in male, which is known as spermatogenesis, and eggs in female, which is known as oogenesis, in ovaries of female and in testes of males. To understand spermatogenesis, we should know that first it goes through spermatocytogenesis, and when sperms are produced in seminiferous tubules of testes, so before they become a haploid cell, first they go through the process which is known as spermatocytogenesis, where somatic cells become the sex cells, or diploid cell changes into a haploid cell. How it's done is that in testes, the seminiferous tubules contains a cell lining, and that cell lining, composing of cells in the germinal epithelium, contains cells which are known as primary germ cells. So these primary germ cells are the cells which enter spermatogenesis, and these germ cells are no different than any other cells of our body, because they contain that same amount of chromosomes like somatic cells before they enter into spermatogenesis. And this is how a diagrammatic representation looks like, with multiplication phase, then growth phase, then maturation phase. And to understand this simply, the multiplication phase is when the primary germ cells with diploid chromosomes divide by mitosis to form large number of spermatogonia. So they continuously divide and multiply, and they form spermatogonia, and this happens in the multiplication phase. And in growth phase, the same spermatogonia grows into a larger spermatocyte by obtaining nourishment from nursing cells, which are the Sertoli cells. So these spermatogonia, they grow into a large primary spermatocyte, and this is the growth phase. And then this spermatocyte enters into the maturation phase. Until now, they have 2 number of chromosome, 2n number of chromosome, and from here in maturation phase, the primary spermatocyte then undergoes 2 maturation division, and these maturation divisions are called as meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. So in maturation phase, the primary spermatocyte goes into first meiotic division, where they give 2 secondary spermatocyte, which are haploid, having n number of chromosome, half number of chromosome in comparison with the primary spermatocyte. Then it goes into the second maturation division, which is the second meiotic division. So in this, that the spermatocyte which are formed will produce 2 spermatids each. That means 1 and the second one will produce total number of 4 spermatids, and this is known as spermatogenesis, when primary germ cells with diploid number of chromosomes goes into multiplication phase and produce spermatogonia, and then it grows into a larger primary spermatocyte which goes into meiotic division and produces 4 spermatids. And these spermatids then, by the process of transformation, and this transformation will result in the circular spermatid to become a spermatozoon, and it is known as spermiogenesis. Now, oogenesis. Oogenesis is the formation of ova in the ovary from primordial germ cells, and it is said to be oogenesis. And in this process also, it is no different from spermatogenesis, because in this process the same primordial germ cell with diploid number goes into multiplication phase, and in multiplication phase the germinal epithelium cells of ovary multiply mitotically to form cell clusters which are known as follicles, and these follicles then forms oogonium or oogonia. So as you can see, in the multiplication phase they have a diploid chromosome number and they go into mitotic division forming oogonia, and they are now called as oogonium altogether. Then they go into the growth phase. In growth phase, the oogonium grows in size and then it attains maturity to become a primary oocyte, which is bigger in size. Then it goes into the maturation phase. So in maturation phase, the primary oocyte forms a larger secondary oocyte and a polar body. So what happens basically in the maturation phase, that the primary oocyte is going into the first meiotic division and producing a larger secondary oocyte, and at the same time it also produces a smaller polar body. And during this phase, the Graafian follicle comes to the ovarian surface, and immediately after meiosis 1, it ruptures to eject the secondary oocyte near the open end of the fallopian tube. So the secondary oocyte is then carried down the fallopian tube by ciliary movements of its cells, and the second meiotic division, however, does not happen, or the maturation division does not happen. It remains suspended till the time of union of the male and female gametes. So starting from the beginning, the primary germ cells with diploid number of chromosomes going into a mitotic division, and they are forming a oogonium or oogonia. Then they goes into the growth phase, and that oogonia becomes into a primary oocyte which is larger in size, which goes into the maturation phase, the first meiotic division, where it forms a secondary oocyte which is a larger body and a smaller body which is the first polar body. And in second maturation division, what happens is they form ovum, which is one female gamete, and a second polar bodies which is producing from the first polar body. So in total, Oogenesis also produces 4 cells, but only one will be matured and become into a female gamete ovum, and the other 3 will be degenerated over time as they have no use. And this maturation division only happens, and it remains suspended till the time of the union of male and female gametes. And the secondary oocyte, which is produced, it divides to form a mature ovum and a second polar body as well. So this is all what we can learn in gametogenesis of male and female, both spermatogenesis and oogenesis. They start from meiotic division, and they start from primary germ cells with diploid chromosome numbers. In spermatogenesis, the germinal epithelium cells of the testis, which is present in the seminiferous tubules, take part, but in female, the germinal epithelium cells of ovary take part in this process of formation of gametes. And these diagrams are very important to understand, and it makes it easier for us to understand.